In the autumn of 1984, in a peaceful suburb in Pennsylvania, a young girl vanished without a trace. Police found no evidence, and the case went cold almost instantly. But 27 years later, a single discovery buried in an attic changed everything. What it revealed shocked everyone and uncovered a truth no one was prepared for. Oak Ridge was the kind of town where nothing bad ever happened. Pastel houses, trimmed lawns, big oak trees lining every sidewalk. Neighbors knew each other by first name. They knew whose dog was barking 2 houses down and whose kids belonged to which porch light. In 1984, front doors were routinely left unlocked. Children rode their bikes until the streetlights flickered on, and that was the signal to come home for dinner. In the middle of that quiet neighborhood lived the Miller family. Thomas managed the hardware store downtown, steady, quiet, a gentle smile always on him. His wife Martha worked as a teller at the community bank, warm and organized, devoted to her 2 daughters. Sarah, the older one, was 12, serious, responsible, fiercely protective of her little sister. And then there was Lily. Lily was 7, a gap-toothed smile, a head of messy brown curls, and a laugh that could fill a whole room. She noticed everything: a strange bug on the sidewalk, a perfect autumn leaf worth pressing into a notebook. She had a small, unique birthmark just below her left collarbone, shaped almost perfectly like a crescent moon. Martha always called it her little star mark. Sarah and Lily were close despite the 5-year gap. Because both parents worked until 5, Sarah walked Lily home after school, a routine they'd practiced perfectly since Lily started 1st grade. Sarah's middle school let out at 2:45, giving her just enough time to reach the elementary bus stop at Elm and Maple, sit on the low stone wall, and wait for the yellow bus to squeal to a stop. Then the 2 of them would walk the last 3 blocks home together. Those 3 blocks were about as safe as blocks could be. Past the Henderson house, where old Mr. Henderson spent his afternoons pruning rose bushes. Past the neighborhood park with its single wooden swing set. Down their own quiet cul-de-sac, where the only traffic was a neighbor pulling in from work. Less than 10 minutes, door to door. They'd done it hundreds of times without a single problem. Tuesday, October 14th, 1984, was not one of those days. The morning started like any other cold air, a thick carpet of orange and yellow leaves, a heavy gray sky that threatened rain and never delivered. At breakfast, Thomas read the paper over coffee. Martha packed lunches at the counter. Sarah rushed through a math worksheet she'd forgotten about the night before. And Lily hummed a song from music class, wearing her favorite bright yellow raincoat even though it wasn't raining, just because she liked how the color looked against the gray sky. Martha packed a sandwich, an apple, and a chocolate chip cookie into Lily's red plastic lunchbox, kissed her forehead, and sent her off. Thomas kissed both girls goodbye and headed for his truck. Before Martha left, Sarah stopped her. "Mom, I have a science project meeting after school. It's going to take about an hour. I won't be able to meet Lily at the bus stop." Martha frowned, glancing at her watch, running through the logistics. The bus schedule couldn't change. Neither she nor Thomas could leave work early. The bank was slammed midweek. "Are you sure you have to stay?" "I have to, Mom. It's a big part of our grade, and my partner can only meet today." Martha looked down at Lily, busy fighting with her shoelaces. 3 blocks. The same neighborhood they'd lived in for 10 years. Every single neighbor on that route knew Lily by name. Broad daylight. Nothing bad ever happened in Oak Ridge. "All right," Martha said finally, crouching to Lily's level. "Sarah has to stay late today. When the bus drops you off, you walk straight home by yourself. Understand?" Lily's eyes went wide and confident. "I know the way, Mommy. It's just past the swing set." "Exactly. Straight home. No stopping to talk to anyone. No detour through the park. Straight to our door. Use your key, lock it behind you, and wait for Sarah. She'll be home by 4. "Okay," Lily said, practically glowing at the idea of doing it all on her own. It made her feel grown up. Sarah felt a brief pang of guilt. I'll be as fast as I can. Just watch cartoons till I get there. It was a simple plan, a logical plan, made by a trusting family in a trusting town. No one could have known that 3 short blocks were about to become the center of a nightmare, or that the bright yellow raincoat would be the last thing anyone ever saw her wear. The school day went exactly as expected. At 3:15, the bus pulled up to the corner of Elm and Maple with a hiss of its brakes. 2 brothers who lived right on the corner hopped off and ran straight up their own driveway. The third child off the bus was Lily. The driver, a kind older woman named Mrs. Higgins, later told police she watched Lily step down onto the sidewalk in her bright yellow raincoat, red lunchbox in hand, and start walking toward home. The doors closed. The bus pulled away. That was the last confirmed sighting of 7-year-old Lily Miller. Sarah finished her project meeting at 3:45 and hurried home through air that had turned noticeably colder, the sky darkening to a bruised gray. She wasn't worried, yet she figured she'd walk in and find Lily cross-legged in front of the TV with cookie crumbs on her chin. She reached the house at 4. The yard was empty. The door was locked, not unusual. Martha had told Lily to lock it, so Sarah let herself in. The house was silent. TV off. Lights off. Lily? Nothing, Lily, I'm home. She checked the kitchen, empty, untouched since breakfast. Her parents' room empty. The bathroom empty. The bedroom she shared with Lily, bed's made. Toys neatly stacked. No sister. A cold unease started climbing up Sarah's spine. She checked the backyard, nothing but the wind and the old fence. She grabbed the kitchen phone and called the bank. Bank of Oak Ridge, this is Martha. Mom, it's Sarah. Is Lily with you? A pause. The casual tone vanished instantly. What do you mean, is she with me? She's supposed to be home. I told her to go straight there. She's not here, Mom. I got home 10 minutes ago. Door was locked. She's not in the house, not in the backyard. I've looked everywhere. Did you check next door? Maybe the neighbor's dog. You told her not to stop anywhere. I know I did. Martha's breath caught. Go outside. Walk back toward the bus stop. I'm telling my manager I have to leave. I'm calling your father. Go. The line clicked dead. Sarah's heart was pounding now. It didn't make sense. It just didn't. Lily was an obedient kid. She wouldn't wander off. Sarah grabbed her jacket and ran, leaving the front door unlocked behind her, retracing the exact route. The first block was quiet, empty driveways, nothing out of place. She passed the park, the swing set empty, chains swaying in the wind. As she reached the second block, she found Mr. Henderson kneeling by his roses. Mr. Henderson, did you see my sister? Did Lily walk by? He straightened up, pulling off his gardening gloves. The little one? No, haven't seen her all afternoon. I've been out here since about 3 trying to beat the frost. Been dead quiet. The blood drained from Sarah's face. If he'd been out front since 3, he'd have seen Lily. His yard had a clean line of sight to the sidewalk. If he hadn't seen her, she'd never made it that far. Sarah ran the rest of the block, lungs burning, scanning under parked cars, behind trees, and reached the corner of Elm and Maple. The stone wall where she always waited sat empty. No kids. No cars. Just dry leaves scraping across the asphalt. She turned in a full circle, searching. There was nowhere for a person to disappear, to just a straight line of houses and sidewalk. And then she saw it. About 20 feet from the corner, resting on top of the low stone wall bordering the property line, sat a small object. Bright red. Sarah walked toward it slowly, legs like lead. Closer, closer. It was Lily's lunchbox. But it wasn't dropped. It wasn't tossed aside. It was placed upright, deliberate, the handle folded neatly down, as if someone had set it there gently so they could use both hands for something else. Sarah touched it. Completely dry. It hadn't been sitting long. Lily. She screamed, not a call anymore, a scream of pure terror, tearing through the quiet street. Silence answered her. The wrong kind of silence. Within 20 minutes, Oak Ridge shifted from a peaceful afternoon into a state of full emergency. Martha's car skidded to a stop at the corner. Thomas arrived moments later, pale and shaking. Sarah stood clutching the lunchbox to her chest, sobbing through the story: the locked door, the empty park, what Mr. Henderson had said. Thomas started knocking on doors. The two brothers who'd gotten off the bus with Lily said they'd seen her start walking, then gone inside without looking back. That was all anyone knew. By 5, the sun had gone down behind the clouds. Streetlights flickered on. Police arrived. Chief Miller, no relation to the family, a 30-year veteran who'd seen runaway teenagers and lost dogs, but never a child vanish in broad daylight in the span of 10 minutes. Squad cars lit up the intersection. A search party formed almost on its own, men with flashlights combing the woods behind the subdivision, women checking sheds and garages. "We need a timeline," Chief Miller said, notepad out. Bus dropped her at 3:15. "Sarah, you walked the route at 3:45 and saw nothing?" "Nothing, just the lunchbox. And Mr. Henderson was out front from 3 on, says she never passed his house." The math was terrifying in its precision. She disappeared somewhere in that half-block stretch between the corner and the park, sometime between 3:15 and 3:45. 300 feet of open sidewalk. Broad daylight. "Did she have any reason to run off?" the chief asked gently. "She's 7, Martha snapped, panic finally cracking her composure. "She doesn't run away. She was wearing a bright yellow raincoat. You can see it from a mile off. Someone took her." The word hung in the freezing air. A kidnapping. In Oak Ridge. Unthinkable, until it became the only explanation left standing. By 8 that night, state police had arrived with 2 K9 units. An officer handled the lunchbox with gloves and let the dogs take the scent. They started at the stone wall, circled tight, then moved to the sidewalk and stopped after exactly 4 steps, right at the curb. They sniffed the pavement, circled the same spot 3 times, whined, and looked up at their handler in confusion. "They didn't lose the scent, Miss Miller," the handler said quietly. "It just ends. Right here on the curb." "What does that mean?" Martha whispered. "It means," Chief Miller said, "she didn't walk away from this spot. She was put in a vehicle." Martha collapsed against Thomas with a sound Sarah would remember for the rest of her life. "Did anyone see a car?" The chief called out to the gathered neighbors. "Anything unusual between 3:15 and 3:30? Silence, then a small, trembling voice from the back of the crowd. Mrs. Gable, elderly, clutching her cardigan against the cold. "I didn't think anything of it at the time," she said. "My eyes aren't what they used to be. But right around 3, before the bus even came, I saw a car parked under the big oak by the park. A sedan. Silver, or maybe light gray. Clean looking. Engine running. I remember the exhaust in the cold air. It just sat there. Windows might have been tinted, or maybe it was the glare. I couldn't see the driver. Then I went in to make tea, and when I came back, it was gone. Must have been around 3:20. A silver sedan. Parked, waiting, watching. The police set up roadblocks, issued statewide alerts, and started checking every silver sedan within 50 miles. But there were no tire tracks on the hard asphalt, no witnesses to the actual moment, no struggle, just a lunchbox set neatly on a stone wall, and a little girl who had vanished into thin air. The nightmare had only begun. Nobody, least of all 12-year-old Sarah, had any idea how long it would last or what would still be waiting, buried decades into the future. The Miller house became a command center overnight. Officers tracked mud across the carpet. The dining table disappeared under topographical maps and portable work lights. Martha sat frozen on the sofa, staring at the front window for a yellow raincoat that never appeared. Thomas answered the same questions from different officers, over and over, his voice wearing down to a whisper. By morning, nearly 300 volunteers gathered outside the community church. The whole town shut down, the hardware store dark, half the bank staff absent, teachers weeping in the lounge. Grid search teams pushed through the woods behind the subdivision for 10 straight hours. Sarah insisted on going with her father, refusing to sit still, needing to fix what she felt she'd broken. They found nothing. No mitten, no footprint, no scrap of yellow fabric. The forest was simply empty, which meant Lily hadn't wandered off. The silver sedan wasn't a theory anymore. It was the only reality left. Within a week, local police were out of their depth, and the state police and FBI took over. Dark sedans and sharp suits appeared on Oak Ridge's quiet streets. Agents pulled DMV files for every registered silver or gray sedan within 50 miles, over 4,000 vehicles. In an era with no highway cameras, no plate readers, no databases, just paper records and door-to-door interviews. Mrs. Gable's description was tragically thin. No make, no model, no plate, not even the driver's gender. The silver sedan was a ghost. It had appeared under an oak tree, swallowed a 7-year-old girl, and vanished without a single trace. As the physical search stalled, the investigation turned inward toward the family. On the 10th day, Thomas and Martha were brought in for formal interviews, in separate rooms, treated less like grieving parents and more like suspects. Was the hardware store failing? Gambling debts? Had Thomas ever raised a hand to Lily? His alibi held, his co-workers backed him, but the accusation itself broke something in him. Martha's interview was worse. Detectives implied her negligence in letting a 7-year-old walk alone was itself suspicious. She sobbed until she could barely breathe. Both were cleared. The damage wasn't. Sarah stopped going to school entirely. She sat on the floor of the room she'd shared with Lily, staring at the perfectly made bed, the stuffed animals lined up and waiting. A police psychologist gently walked her through the day again and again. "It's my fault," Sarah whispered during one session, eyes on the floor. "I told her I'd be there. I traded her for a science project. No amount of reassurance, you're only 12, you couldn't have known, reached her." In her mind, the equation was simple and merciless. Skip the meeting. Be at the bus stop. Hold Lily's hand. Look the driver in the eye, and her sister would still be here. That guilt would shape the entire rest of her life. Weeks became a month. The command center moved back to the station. The flyers on every telephone pole started to weather and curl. Thanksgiving came and went, hollow and silent, an empty chair at the table that no one could talk about. The town itself changed. Parents stopped letting kids play unsupervised. Every school pickup became a guarded operation, parents scanning the street for unfamiliar cars. Oak Ridge's innocence disappeared as fast as Lily had. All winter, the police chased dead ends that hurt almost as much as the silence. In December, a trucker reported a girl matching Lily's description at a diner 300 miles away in Ohio, wearing yellow, seemingly afraid of the man she was with. The Millers sat frozen by the phone for 3 agonizing hours, Martha in her coat, ready to drive across 3 states. It turned out to be a grandfather and his 8-year-old granddaughter crying over a dropped ice cream cone. After that day, Martha stopped answering the phone. She couldn't survive another swing between hope and devastation. By February 1985, 4 months in, the case was officially cold. The FBI packed up and moved to newer files. Only one investigator stayed obsessed with the timeline: Detective Reynolds, a quiet, methodical state police veteran who didn't believe in bad luck, only structural flaws. He kept coming back to the window. 10 minutes, broad daylight, a residential street, and a kidnapper who left no trace and was seen by exactly one elderly woman with poor eyesight. Too clean. Too perfect. The silver sedan hadn't been cruising for a target. It had parked and waited 30 minutes before the bus even arrived. Waiting implies expecting. But Lily never walked that route alone. She always walked it with Sarah. And Sarah's decision to stay late hadn't been made in advance, it was a same-day arrangement. Reynolds pulled Sarah's original interview transcript and found the section about the science project meeting. He called the middle school, spoke with the science teacher, and got the name of Sarah's partner, Emily Vance. He drove out and sat down with Emily, now 13. Sarah stayed after school to meet you in the library. She said you told her it had to be that day. Remember that? Emily looked confused. I didn't tell her that. Our project wasn't due for 2 more weeks. I was planning on going straight home, but right before lunch, the office sent a note to my classroom. Said Sarah needed to work on it that day because she was going out of town for the weekend, so I met her in the library. A cold spike hit Reynolds' chest. He went to the front office and demanded the phone log for October 14th. The secretary flipped back through her handwritten records to an entry at 9:45 that morning. Call came in for Sarah Miller, she read. Said it was Sarah's mother said there was a family emergency that weekend and Sarah needed to finish her project. Caller asked me to pass the message to Sarah and Emily both. Reynolds knew Martha's time card put her at the bank at 9:45 that morning. She hadn't made that call. Was it a woman's voice? He asked. Did it sound like Mrs. Miller? The secretary shook her head slowly. No, it was a man. Very polite. Said he was calling on her mother's behalf. I assumed it was her father, or an uncle. Reynolds stepped back from the desk, the full shape of it crashing into place. This hadn't been a stranger driving by. Someone had known the family's schedule, known the name of Sarah's science partner, and had actively manipulated the school to guarantee Sarah would be stuck in a library while 7-year-old Lily walked home completely alone. A predator hadn't just been waiting in a car. A predator had been watching from the inside. But it was 1984. Caller ID didn't exist for the public. Local calls left no trace once the receiver went down. Police brought in Emily's family for hours of questioning her father, an accountant with an airtight alibi at his firm, her mother, a nurse mid-shift at the county hospital. Both cleared completely, and because investigators were hunting for a middle-aged man in a silver sedan, they never once looked at the other person living in the Vance household, Emily's 18-year-old brother, quietly finishing his senior year at Oak Ridge High, a few miles down the road. Without a name attached to that phone call, the trail went cold again. The kidnapper had outsmarted the entire system, and the case slid agonizingly into silence. Time did what time does. Years passed. The Miller family's home slowly hollowed out. Thomas spent his evenings on the porch, watching the street for a girl who never came. The stress wore him down, and in the winter of 2006, his heart gave out. He died without ever learning who took his daughter. Martha's decline took a different shape. Without a body, without a grave, her mind refused to accept the loss, and that refusal slowly curdled into early-onset dementia. By the time the 27th anniversary approached, she was setting a place for Lily at dinner, buying children's cereal at the store. It became unsafe for her to live alone. That left Sarah. By the fall of 2011, she was 39, her whole adult life shaped by 10 minutes in a middle school library back in 1984. The guilt had never left her chest. She'd never moved away from Oak Ridge, some part of her terrified that if she left, Lily might somehow come home to an empty house. She'd become a second-grade teacher at Oak Ridge Elementary, walking the same halls her sister once had. She was also a mother now, to a bright 7-year-old named Maya, the exact age Lily had been. Sarah drove her to school every morning and picked her up the second the bell rang. Maya never played in the front yard alone, never walked anywhere by herself. The past was woven tight into the present. That October, Sarah faced the hardest task of her life, moving Martha into a care facility and emptying the childhood home for sale. She spent a week boxing up rooms, each drawer a small trip backward in time. On a rainy Tuesday, she climbed into the dusty attic and, tucked beneath an old quilt, found her mother's cedar chest, the place Martha had hidden everything too painful to look at. Inside the red lunchbox, returned by police in 1988 when the evidence locker was cleared. The math worksheet from that terrible morning. And at the bottom, beneath old coloring books, a heavy manila envelope, stiff with age, stamped Oak Haven Portraits Fall 1984 school pictures. Sarah's breath caught. Back then, the school photography company mailed portrait packets home in late October. This one must have arrived just weeks after Lily disappeared, and her shattered parents, living in a house full of police officers, couldn't bear to open it. It had sat sealed in the dark for 27 years. She sat down on the attic floor, hands shaking, and tore it open. Inside, the standard portrait sheet 2 8x10 prints of Lily in a red knitted sweater, curls pushed back, gap-toothed grin, the crescent moon birthmark just visible at her collar. Sarah cried, tracing the glossy surface. And a second sheet, the playground candidates package, informal shots taken during recess. 3 were nothing. The 4th stopped Sarah's heart completely. Lily, laughing at something off camera, standing near the chain-link fence at the edge of the schoolyard. Behind the fence, parked on the street, a silver sedan, and leaning against its hood, arms crossed, staring directly through the fence, not at the playground in general, but straight at Lily, was a young man. Sarah zoomed in with her phone. Dark hair parted to the side, a strong jaw, deep-set eyes, and a heavy varsity jacket with white leather sleeves. Stitched on the sleeve, the number 84, a high school senior. The police had spent thousands of hours chasing a middle-aged predator in the DMV records. They'd never once thought to look at a teenager who might be driving a car registered to his parents. The face was oddly, hauntingly familiar. Sarah dug through her own childhood boxes until she found her father's old district yearbooks. He'd collected one every year. She pulled the 1984 volume, flipped to the senior portraits, and ran her finger down the alphabet until she reached the letter V. There he was. Same hair, same jaw, same eyes. The name beneath the photo, Mark Vance. Emily Vance's older brother. The room seemed to spin. He'd have known exactly who Sarah was from sitting at his own kitchen table while Emily talked about school. He'd have known Sarah walked her little sister home every day. And on October 14th, an 18-year-old boy with a polite grown-up voice had called the school pretending to be an adult, acting on Martha's behalf, isolating his target with terrifying precision. And because he was just a local kid, no one had ever looked twice. Sarah didn't call the police. Not yet. A 27-year-old photo of a teenager near a car wasn't proof of anything. Mark could claim he'd just been waiting to pick up his sister. If she tipped off the authorities too soon, he might vanish again, or worse. She needed to know where he was now. She went to her laptop and started digging. Property records showed the Vance family had sold their Oak Ridge house in December 1985. The whole family had moved away barely a year after Lily disappeared. A search for Mark Vance turned up nothing useful until she narrowed it Mark Vance and Emily Vance together and found a 2008 obituary for a woman named Helen Vance, survived by a daughter Emily in Chicago, and a son, Mark, living in Clear Creek, New York. Sarah searched Mark Vance, Clear Creek, and the first result was a business page, Vance Landscaping and Design. On the About Us page was a professional photo of Mark, 45 now, hair going gray, standing in front of a company truck. Beside him, arm around his waist, was a woman. Mark Vance founded Vance Landscaping in 1995. He runs daily operations alongside his wife Chloe, who manages the office and customer relations. Sarah's eyes moved to the woman's face, mid-30s, a thick head of messy brown curls, a smile with the gap tooth, long since fixed by braces, but the same eyes, the same jaw, the same crinkle at the nose. Sarah zoomed in on the woman's chest, just below the V-neck of her dress, and found it. A small, deeply pigmented crescent moon birthmark, exactly where it had always been. Lily wasn't dead. She'd been kept, hidden, raised in secret, and once she was old enough, made into a wife. The nausea hit Sarah so hard she had to grip the kitchen sink. He'd erased her past, convinced her she had no family, built a fortress of lies around her, and lived safely inside it for almost 30 years. And then the shock burned off into something colder, sharp, focused, entirely protective. She couldn't just call the police. Oak Ridge's department had failed her family once already, and a call now would be slow, loud, and traceable, and Mark Vance had proven himself calculated enough to notice a single cruiser in his driveway. If he panicked, he could grab Lily and vanish. Or do worse. And Lily herself might not even understand she was a victim. She might defend him. Terrified. At the worst possible moment. Sarah had to be the one to break the illusion quietly, before he knew anything was happening. She took a week of family leave, dropped Maya at a friend's, and drove to her mother's empty house one last time. From the cedar chest, she took the lunchbox and the envelope of photographs and set off on the 4-hour drive north to Clare Creek, New York. Clare Creek was tiny. One main street, a gas station, a grocery, a post office, houses spread far apart down long gravel driveways. The kind of place where privacy wasn't just respected, it was geographically built in. Vance Landscaping sat on a large plot at the end of a dead-end road, a modest gray 2-story house, a corrugated steel equipment garage, 3 company trucks in the driveway. Sarah didn't pull in. She parked a quarter-mile down, hidden behind a line of spruce trees, and watched. For 3 hours, nothing moved. Then, just after 1 o'clock, the garage door rattled open and Mark walked out, broad-shouldered now. Work boots, flannel, a heavy authoritative swagger, barking orders at 2 younger crew members. Through her father's old binoculars, Sarah watched him with a wave of revulsion. He looked so ordinary, so normal. Then the front door opened and Lily stepped onto the porch, older, framed by the same brown curls, but unmistakably her sister, unmistakably their mother, at that age. Sarah pressed a hand over her mouth to keep from sobbing. She watched Lily hand Mark a stack of clipboards, watched him snatch them without a word of thanks, flip through the pages, point sharply toward the house, watched him grab the back of Lily's neck, not affectionate, possessive, a hard squeeze and a shake before she hurried back inside without a flinch, like it happened every day. Over the next 2 days, Sarah tracked their routine from a cheap motel 3 towns over. Mark and his crew left every morning around 7:30 and didn't return until late afternoon. Lily never left the property, no car of her own, nothing but the commercial trucks. She swept the porch, checked the mailbox, sat alone on a bench staring at the trees. A ghost, entirely dependent on the man who'd taken her. Sarah visited the town hall, posing as a background investigator, and pulled marriage records. Mark and Chloe had married in May of 1996. Lily would have been 19. He'd waited 12 years, until she was legally an adult, before binding her to him on paper. Chloe's maiden name was listed as Adams, her birthplace an obscure township in another state, no verifiable social security record on file. The clerk, elderly and helpful, remembered when Mark brought her to town in the early 90s. Said she was a runaway he'd taken in. Rough life, no family. He homeschooled her himself. They always kept to themselves. He'd rewritten her entire existence. And a town that minded its own business had never asked a single hard question. Thursday morning, Sarah watched the trucks pull out at 7:30 and disappear down the road. The property fell silent. Mark wouldn't be back for hours. This was the window. She carried the lunchbox packed now with the photographs and the yearbook up the gravel driveway and onto the porch, legs heavy with 27 years of grief and guilt. She raised her fist, hesitated one breath, and knocked. The door opened a few inches. Lily's face appeared in the gap, the same soft brown eyes as their mother, the same curls, but guarded, tired in a way that came from a lifetime of quiet submission. "Can I help you?" Her voice was soft, raspy, unrecognizable from the loud 7-year-old Sarah remembered. "We don't buy anything," Lily added quickly, scanning the empty driveway. "My husband isn't home. You should go." "Wait, please. I'm not selling anything." Sarah held the door open with her hand. "My name is Sarah Miller. I came from Oak Ridge, Pennsylvania." The name meant nothing. Lily just stared. Blank, the erasure had been total. "I don't know where that is," she whispered. "Please let go of the door." Sarah understood then words weren't going to break through nearly 30 years of a carefully built lie. She lifted the lunchbox instead, holding it up in the gap of the doorway. "You don't remember Oak Ridge," she said, "but do you remember this?" Lily's eyes locked onto the bright red plastic, the folded handle, the small metal clasp, and something in her body reacted before her mind caught up. Her face went white. Her breathing stopped. Her hands began to shake. "Where," she stammered, "did you get that?" "You left it on a stone wall," Sarah said gently, tears finally spilling over. "Corner of elm and maple. You set it down right before he took you." Lily let go of the door and stumbled backward into the entryway, hands flying to her mouth. Sarah stepped inside the house, spotless, sterile, no photos on the walls, no warmth anywhere. A cell dressed up as a home. "Who are you?" Lily cried, backing against the wall. "Why do you have that?" "You're not Chloe Adams." Sarah walked toward her slowly, the lunchbox held out like an offering. "Your name is Lily Miller. I'm your sister." "No." Lily shook her head, eyes shut tight. "I don't have a sister. I don't have a family. Mark found me. He saved me." Sarah didn't argue. She set the lunchbox down, opened it, and pulled out the 8x10 portrait, the little girl in the red sweater, gap-toothed grin, curls pushed back. "Look at me," Sarah pleaded. "Please, Lily, just look." Lily's breathing slowed to short, shallow gasps as she stared at the photo, then raised a trembling hand to trace her own jaw, her own nose. A ghost of herself, staring back. "Right here." Sarah pointed to the collar of the sweater. "You have a birthmark shaped like a crescent moon, just below your left collarbone. Our mother called it your star. She kissed it every night before bed." Lily's hand went straight to her own collarbone, pressing over the fabric, over the mark Mark had always told her was nothing. She slid down the wall to the floor, knees pulled to her chest, rocking. "I was supposed to walk you home that day," Sarah said, kneeling in front of her. "I stayed late for a project. You got off the bus alone, and he was waiting. I've spent 27 years thinking it was my fault. We thought you were dead." "He said I was a runaway." Lily sobbed into her hands. "Said I was lost in the city. Said no one wanted me." Sarah pulled out the playground photo next, laid it on the floor and pointed the silver sedan behind the fence, the young man leaning on the hood, watching, then the yearbook, open to Mark Vance's senior portrait. "He didn't find you in a city," Sarah said, quiet and hard. "He stole you from our neighborhood. He planned it. He called my school pretending to be an adult so I'd be stuck in a library so you'd have to walk alone. He parked right there and waited." Lily stared at the evidence, the photo, the yearbook, the lunchbox, undeniable, absolute, the man she slept beside, who decided what she ate and when she could speak, wasn't her savior. He was the one who'd torn her away from her mother, her father, her sister, and buried her under a lie for 27 years. The scream that came out of her wasn't sadness. It was something breaking loose, all at once, decades of suppressed trauma crashing down. Sarah pulled her into her arms and held on while she thrashed and sobbed, crying just as hard herself, burying her face in Lily's curls. They stayed on the floor a long time. Two sisters violently reunited in the wreckage of a stolen life. When the worst of it passed, Sarah pulled back, gripping Lily's shoulders. "We have to go. Right now. If he comes back and finds me here, he'll never let you leave." "I don't have anything to pack," Lily whispered. He buys everything. Nothing's mine. You don't need anything from this place. Everything you need is in my car. They ran down the gravel driveway hand in hand, left the front door standing open behind them, and didn't look back. Sarah's car threw dirt in the air as it peeled away from the property. She didn't drive to the Clear Creek police. Mark had lived there for decades. There was no telling who he knew. Instead, she drove 90 minutes at high speed, checking the mirror the entire way, until they reached the regional state police headquarters in the nearest city. Lily clung to her arm, shaking, terrified of the noise and the uniforms. Sarah walked straight to the front desk and demanded the highest-ranking detective available. 10 minutes later, they were in a secure interview room with Captain Miller, a stern, empathetic man in his late 50s. Sarah didn't wait for questions. She spread the evidence across the table: the portrait, the playground candid, the yearbook, the property records. In October of 1984, a 7-year-old girl named Lily Miller was abducted from Oak Ridge, Pennsylvania. Police were looking for a middle-aged man in a silver sedan. They missed the teenager who went to the local high school. He took her across state lines, renamed her Chloe Adams, and kept her for 27 years. She took Lily's trembling hand. "This is Lily Miller. The man who took her is Mark Vance, and he's running a landscaping company in Clear Creek, New York, right now." Captain Miller looked at the photograph, the yearbook, and then at Lily's face, and didn't need a DNA test to know he was looking at the truth. The response was immediate. State police looped in the FBI within the hour. A federal warrant went out for Mark Vance's arrest, and given the length of the abduction, a tactical team was sent rather than a patrol car. At 4 that afternoon, Mark was standing in a client's driveway, barking at his crew to load mulch faster. Entirely secure in a life he believed untouchable, right up until 3 unmarked SUVs and 2 state cruisers blocked the driveway, sirens screaming. "Mark Vance, get on the ground." Now, he froze. The commanding facade shattered instantly. He looked toward the road, as if expecting to see Lily standing there. There was nowhere to run. He sank to his knees in the dirt and put his hands up. "Mark Vance, you are under arrest for the 1984 kidnapping of Lily Miller." The monster of Oak Ridge had finally been caught. He would spend the rest of his life in federal prison, stripped of every ounce of control he'd spent 30 years building. Back at headquarters, a victim's advocate and trauma psychologist sat with Lily. Her fingerprints, taken that afternoon, matched a set lifted decades earlier from one of her childhood toys, still sitting in an evidence locker. The scientific confirmation was just a formality everyone in that room already knew. Recovery wasn't instant or magical. Lily had to learn how to exist in a world she'd been hidden from for nearly 3 decades. Sarah brought her home, not to the old cul-de-sac house, already sold, too full of the day it all started, but to her own house. The first time Lily met 7-year-old Maya, a burst of energy with the same messy brown curls, Lily sank to her knees in the grass and wept, holding her niece, feeling the echo of her own stolen childhood wrap around her. Sarah became her anchor. They sat for hours with old photo albums. Sarah told her about their father, how hard he'd searched, how he'd died still waiting for her to come home. It was agonizing for Lily to grieve a father she'd been forced to forget. But grieving him also meant she was real again. 3 weeks after the rescue, Sarah drove Lily to the care facility to see their mother. Martha's dementia was severe by then, most days spent staring out at the garden, lost in her own fading mind. "Mom," Sarah said softly, kneeling by her chair. "I brought someone to see you." Martha turned, offered a faint, polite smile, recognition of a friendly face, nothing more. Then her eyes drifted past Sarah, to the woman standing nervously by the door. To the curls, the eyes, the face that mirrored her own at that age so exactly. The room went still. Something in the fog behind Martha's eyes seemed to part. She raised a shaking hand and pointed one crooked finger. "You wore your yellow raincoat," she whispered, her voice suddenly, astonishingly clear. "I told you to come straight home." Lily broke, crossed the room, and fell to her knees beside the chair, burying her face in her mother's lap. Martha didn't ask where she'd been, or how she'd become a grown woman. She just laid her frail hands on Lily's curls and stroked them, the exact same motion from a kitchen table 27 years gone. "You're home now, sweetie," Martha murmured, tears in her clouded eyes. "My little Starmark is finally home." Sarah stood in the corner, crying quietly, watching her family become whole again and possibly after all of it. The story of Lily Miller is a hard reminder that evil doesn't always look the way we expect. Sometimes it's the quiet kid down the hall. Sometimes it's the polite voice on the other end of a phone call. It hides behind normalcy, and it counts on a trusting community never asking the hard questions. But the story is also proof of something stronger, that the truth doesn't stay buried forever, no matter how carefully it's guarded. It only takes one forgotten envelope in an attic, one small crescent moon birthmark caught in a photograph. Mark Vance spent 27 years believing he'd rewritten history for good. He never counted on the quiet, stubborn love of an older sister who refused to let the past stay buried. Lily Miller lost 27 years her childhood, her father, her name. But she survived. She got her name back. She got her family back. And sitting in the garden with her sister and her niece, watching the sun go down over a quiet town, she finally knew exactly who she was. And she knew she would never be lost again.